You carry something that follows you through every door, every conversation, every quiet moment when you think you've finally found peace. It's the weight of what you cannot release, the memory that plays on repeat, the person who left but never really left, the version of yourself that died but refuses to be buried. You tell yourself you've moved on, that you've healed, that you've grown beyond the pain. But in the spaces between your thoughts, in the pause before sleep, you feel that they're this invisible anchor dragging you back to a shore you swore you'd never visit again. There's something following you through your days like a shadow that never quite aligns with your body. You've learned to carry it so skillfully that others can't see it, but you feel its presence in the hollow of your chest, in the way your breath catches when certain songs play, in the sudden heaviness that descends without warning. You've built a life around this weight, shaped your movements to accommodate its presence, crafted your identity around the story of what you've lost and what you've survived. You wake each morning with the same quiet hope that today will be different, that the ache will have dissolved in sleep, that you'll finally feel light enough to move through the world without this constant gravitational pull backward. But by evening, you recognize the familiar texture of longing, the way it colors every interaction, every decision, every moment of potential joy. You've become an expert at functioning with this burden, at smiling through the heaviness, at pretending that what you carry doesn't shape every step you take. The truth you don't want to face is that you've grown intimate with this pain. You know its rhythms better than your own heartbeat, its seasons more clearly than the weather outside your window. It has become your most faithful companion, the one thing that has never abandoned you, never changed, never asked you to be anything other than what you are in your deepest sorrow. In a world that demands constant movement, constant growth, constant progress, your grief has offered you the strange comfort of staying exactly where you are. You've tried everything the world told you would work. You've practiced gratitude until the words felt hollow in your mouth, repeated affirmations that bounced off the walls of your resistance like echoes in an empty room. You've filled your calendar with distractions, your conversations with forced optimism, your nights with exhaustion that you hope would be deep enough to silence the whispers of what you cannot release. You've read the books, followed the advice, performed the rituals of healing with the dedication of someone who believes that if you just try hard enough, if you just want it badly enough, the past will loosen its grip. But somewhere beneath all your efforts, beneath all your progress, beneath all the evidence of your strength and resilience, there's a truth you haven't wanted to face. You're not holding on because you're weak. You're holding on because letting go would mean losing something. Your soul believes it needs to survive. The very thing that torments you has also become your proof of love, your evidence of depth, your assurance that what you experienced mattered enough to leave a permanent mark. You've convinced yourself that forgiveness is a choice you can make with your conscious mind, that healing follows a timeline you can control, that strength means moving forward without looking back. But your body knows better. Your nervous system holds memories your mind has tried to forget. Your heart carries, contracts your consciousness never signed. The part of you that cannot let go operates from a different logic entirely, one that doesn't respond to willpower or positive thinking or the well-meaning advice of those who love you. You've discovered that healing isn't linear, that growth isn't constant, that the journey toward wholeness doesn't follow the neat progression you were promised. Some days you feel like you're making progress, like you're finally becoming the person you were meant to be without this weight. Other days, you're startled by how quickly you can return to the exact place you thought you'd left forever, as if no time has passed at all, as if all your work has been undone by a single trigger, a familiar scent, a song that carries you back to when your heart was whole and then shattered. There's a part of you that has become intimate with your pain, that knows its rhythms and textures better than you know your own breathing. This isn't masochism, it's something far more complex and unconscious. Your suffering has become your identity, your proof of love, your evidence that what you lost mattered. To release it would mean facing the terrifying possibility that you could exist without it, that your story could be rewritten, that the person you've become through your pain might not be who you truly are. You've built a home inside your wound, furnished it with memories and decorated it with the meaning you've extracted from your suffering. You know every corner of this internal landscape, every shadow and shaft of light. You've learned to navigate its corridors in the dark, to find comfort in its familiar ache, to draw strength from its bitter wisdom. The thought of leaving this place, even though it hurts, even though it limits you, even though it keeps you tethered to a past that no longer exists, feels like abandoning not just your pain, but yourself, your attachment to what you cannot. Release has become a form of devotion, a way of honoring what was sacred, a promise to never forget what once made you feel most alive. You carry this weight not because you enjoy suffering, but because letting go feels like betrayal, like admitting that the love wasn't real, that the loss didn't matter, that the person you were in that relationship or that phase of your life was somehow disposable. The deepest truth is that you've confused holding on with staying faithful, remembering with remaining stuck, honoring the past with being imprisoned by it. You've created a mythology around your inability to let go, a story that makes your suffering noble and your attachment meaningful. But beneath this narrative lies a more complex reality. You're not holding on to what you lost, you're holding on to who you were when you had it. And you're terrified of discovering who you might become without it. What you cannot let go of lives not in your conscious mind, but in the shadow, that dark repository of everything you've rejected, denied, or refused to integrate about yourself. Your inability to release isn't really about the person who left or the thing that was lost. It's about what that loss revealed about you, what it forced you to feel, what it made you become. The shadow holds onto what challenges your self-image, what contradicts your preferred narrative, what exposes the parts of yourself you've worked so hard to hide. You cannot let go, because letting go would mean facing these disowned aspects of your being, the neediness you've tried to transcend, the vulnerability you've learned to armor, the dependency you've worked to outgrow. These live in the shadow, and they're bound to what you cannot release. Your attachment isn't just to what you lost, it's to the version of yourself that was capable of such complete surrender, such total trust, such devastating heartbreak. The part of you that clings knows something your conscious mind refuses to acknowledge, that in letting go, you would have to face the full spectrum of who you are, including the parts you've rejected as too much, too intense, too inconvenient for the life you're trying to build. Your shadow holds not just your pain, but your passion, not just your wounds, but your wildness, not just your attachment, but your aliveness. You've spent so much energy trying to become someone who doesn't need what you cannot have, someone who can love without attachment, someone who can care without clinging. But the shadow knows that this idealized version of yourself is only half the truth. The other half lives in the messy, complicated, utterly human reality of your needs, your longings, your beautiful and inconvenient capacity to love so deeply that it changes you at the cellular level. The shadow whispers that your inability to let go isn't a weakness to overcome, but a strength to understand, not a problem to solve, but a mystery to enter. It holds the key to your deepest nature, your most authentic self, your truest capacity for connection. But accessing this wisdom requires something you've been avoiding, the willingness to turn toward what you've been running from, to embrace what you've been rejecting, to integrate what you've been trying to transcend. Your conscious mind has been fighting a war against your unconscious attachments, trying to think your way out of what you can only feel your way through. But the shadow operates by different rules. It doesn't respond to logic or willpower or the desire to be different. It responds to recognition, to acceptance, to the radical act of meeting yourself exactly where you are, without trying to change or fix or improve anything. Somewhere in the depths of your psyche, you made an agreement you don't remember making. You promised to carry this pain as a form of loyalty, to preserve this connection as a way of honoring what was sacred. Your unconscious mind believes that releasing means betraying, that moving on means forgetting, that healing means admitting it didn't matter. This contract was written in the language of survival, signed in moments of overwhelming emotion, and it continues to govern your present even though the circumstances that created it have long since passed. You are bound by invisible chains forged in the furnace of your own making. These chains were meant to protect you, to ensure that you would never again be caught off guard by loss, never again be so naive about the impermanence of what you love. They were meant to be temporary, emergency measures to help you survive the immediate crisis of losing what you couldn't bear to lose. But somewhere along the way, these protective measures became permanent. Fixtures and what was meant to keep you safe began to keep you trapped. The contract you made with yourself seemed reasonable at the time. You would hold onto the pain as proof of love, carry the wound as evidence of depth, maintain the connection as a way of honoring what was beautiful. In exchange, you would never have to face the full reality of loss, never have to accept the complete finality of what ended, never have to let go of the identity you built around what you could no longer have. But contracts made in crisis rarely serve us in calm. The terms you agreed to when you were drowning don't make sense now that you've learned to swim. The promises you made to yourself when you were broken don't fit the person you've become through your breaking. Yet your unconscious mind, loyal and literal, continues to honor agreements that your conscious self has outgrown. You've been living under the governance of emergency legislation that was never meant to be permanent. The protective measures you put in place to survive the immediate aftermath of loss have become the very barriers that prevent you from moving forward. Your psyche has been operating in crisis mode long after the crisis has passed, maintaining defenses against threats that no longer exist. The unconscious contract binds you not just to what you lost, but to who you were when you lost it. It preserves not just the connection, but the version of yourself that was capable of such complete devastation. In honoring this agreement, you've been keeping yourself small enough to fit back into a reality that no longer exists, maintaining an identity that was forged in the fire of circumstances that will never come again. Breaking this contract doesn't mean dishonoring what was sacred. It means recognizing that the deepest way to honor what you've lost is to let it transform you, rather than trap you, to let it teach you rather than define you, to let it become part of your story rather than the entire story. The most profound act of loyalty isn't holding on, it's integrating what you've learned and allowing it to make you more capable of love, not less. What you fear most isn't the pain of holding on, it's the possibility of who you might become. If you let go, wholeness is terrifying because it means you would no longer have an excuse for your limitations, no longer have a reason to stay small, no longer have a familiar suffering to return to when life demands your full presence. Your wound has become your refuge, your reason for not fully engaging with life, your protection against the vulnerability that comes with being completely alive. To heal completely would mean stepping into your power, accepting your responsibility, and living without the protective armor of victimhood. It would mean facing the world as someone who is capable of great love and great loss, someone who can be hurt and still remain open, someone who can suffer and still choose joy. The prospect of such radical aliveness is both exhilarating and terrifying. You've grown comfortable with the limitations your wound provides. It gives you a reason to say no to opportunities that frighten you, to avoid relationships that might challenge you, to stay in situations that feel safe because they don't ask you to be more than you were when you were broken. Your inability to let go has become a convenient excuse for not having to discover the full extent of your capabilities, the true depth of your resilience, the actual breadth of your capacity for happiness. But beneath the fear lies a deeper truth. You're not afraid of being hurt again, you're afraid of being powerful. You're not afraid of loss, you're afraid of what you might create. If you truly believed in your ability to build something beautiful and then trust life enough to let it exist without clinging to it, you're not afraid of vulnerability, you're afraid of the responsibility that comes with being fully alive, fully present, fully engaged with the magnificent and terrifying project of being human. The version of yourself that can let go is also the version that can love without reservation, create without guarantee, and live without the safety net of familiar suffering. This version of you would have to show up completely to your own life, to take full responsibility for your choices, to stop hiding behind the story of what was done to you, and start writing the story of what you're going to do with what remains. There's a profound paradox at the heart of your struggle. You cannot let go of what you will not first fully embrace. Your attempts to release have failed because they've been acts of rejection, not integration. You've been trying to push away what needs to be pulled closer, to abandon what needs to be understood, to forget what needs to be remembered with consciousness, rather than compulsion. The path to freedom doesn't lead away from your pain, it leads through it, into it, with it as your teacher rather than your enemy. You must learn to hold your suffering without being held by it, to carry your wounds without being defined by them, to honor your attachments without being enslaved by them. This is the paradox of conscious suffering. The very thing that has been your prison can become your doorway to liberation. What you've been calling weakness, your inability to simply let go, is actually a profound capacity for depth, for meaning, for the kind of love that leaves marks. The problem isn't that you feel too much or hold on too long or love too deeply. The problem is that you've been unconscious about it, driven by patterns you don't understand, bound by contracts you don't remember making. Conscious suffering means turning toward your pain with curiosity rather than resistance, with acceptance rather than judgment, with the understanding that your capacity for deep feeling is not a flaw to be corrected, but a gift to be channeled. It means recognizing that the very sensitivity that makes you vulnerable also makes you capable of profound connection, extraordinary empathy, and the kind of love that can transform not just your own life, but the lives of those you touch. The goal isn't to become someone who can easily let go, but to become someone who chooses consciously what to hold and what to release. It's not about numbing yourself to attachment, but about relating to your attachments with awareness, intention, and the understanding that love and loss are not opposites, but partners in the dance of being. Fully human. When you stop fighting the part of yourself that cannot let go, when you cease the internal war between who you think you should be and who you actually are, something shifts. The energy you've spent in resistance becomes available for transformation. You begin to see that your capacity to love deeply, to feel profoundly, to remain faithful to connection, these aren't weaknesses to overcome, but strengths to channel. Your sensitivity, your depth, your inability to love casually, these are the very qualities that make you capable of profound meaning and authentic relationship. The world needs people who feel deeply, who love fully, who understand that some things are worth holding onto and some things are worth letting go of, and who have the wisdom to know the difference. The alchemy of integration begins when you stop trying to get rid of parts of yourself and start learning to work with them. Your attachments, your wounds, your capacity for deep feeling, these become allies rather than enemies. When you approach them with consciousness rather than resistance, you discover that the very things you've been trying to transcend are the raw materials for your transformation. Your inability to let go becomes a doorway to understanding what you truly value, what you're willing to fight for, what deserves your loyalty, and what deserves your freedom. Your wounds become sources of wisdom. Your pain becomes a teacher. Your attachments become a map to what matters most to you. The goal isn't to become someone who doesn't feel these things. It's to become someone who feels them consciously, intentionally, with full awareness of their power and their purpose. Integration means bringing all parts of yourself into relationship with each other. The part that wants to hold on and the part that wants to let go. The part that loves deeply and the part that fears loss. The part that has been wounded and the part that has been healed. It means creating internal space for contradictions, for complexity, for the full spectrum of your human experience. You discover that you don't have to choose between loving and letting go, between honoring the past and embracing the future, between being deeply feeling and being functionally whole. You can be all of these things simultaneously. You can carry your love without being burdened by it, honor your losses without being defined by them, feel deeply without being overwhelmed by the feeling. The liberation of conscious choice emerges when you understand why you're holding on. But once you see the unconscious patterns, the shadow dynamics, the invisible contracts that bind you to your pain, you discover something remarkable. You have always had the power to choose, not the power to simply decide to feel differently, but the power to enter into conscious relationship with your own psyche, to negotiate with your shadow, to rewrite the contracts that no longer serve you. Freedom isn't the absence of attachment, it's the presence of choice in how you relate to what moves through you. It's the ability to love without clinging, to remember without being imprisoned by memory, to honor what was without being unable to embrace what is. This kind of freedom doesn't come from getting rid of your capacity for deep feeling. It comes from developing the wisdom to channel that capacity in ways that serve your growth rather than limit it. You begin to understand that letting go was never about forcing yourself to stop caring or to forget or to pretend that what mattered didn't matter. It was about developing the inner strength to hold your experiences lightly, To love without possessing, to commit without clinging, to remain open to what is while honoring what was. The choice to let go becomes not an act of rejection, but an act of love for yourself. Love for what you're releasing, love for what you're making space to receive. It becomes a conscious decision to stop using your past as an excuse for limiting your future, to stop letting your wounds define your worth, to stop confusing loyalty with imprisonment. In the end, you realize that you were never actually holding onto what you lost. You were holding on to who you were when you had it, and you were terrified of discovering who you might become without it. But the person you become through conscious letting go is not someone who loves less or feels less or cares less. It's someone who loves more consciously, feels more intentionally, and cares more wisely. You are not broken for having held on so long. You are not weak for loving so deeply. You are not flawed for feeling so much. You are human beautifully and completely human, with all the complexity and contradiction that humanity entails. And in that humanity lies not just your capacity for suffering, but your capacity for transformation, not just your ability to be wounded, but your ability to be healed, not just your power to hold on, but your power to let go when the time is right. The invitation has always been there, waiting for you to accept it, to love yourself enough to let go of what no longer serves, to trust yourself enough to step into who you're becoming, to believe in yourself enough to choose freedom over familiarity, growth over safety, the unknown over the known. The invitation remains open, patient, and persistent, ready for you whenever you're ready to receive it. The power you've always had is not the power to control what happens to you, but the power to choose how you relate to what happens to you. Not the power to determine what you feel, but the power to decide what you do with what you feel. Not the power to escape your psychology, but the power to transform your relationship with your psychology when you realize that your inability to let go has been a form of unconscious wisdom, a way of preserving something essential about yourself. You can begin to honor it while also questioning whether it still serves you. When you understand that your attachment has been a form of love, you can begin to love more consciously. When you see that your holding on has been a form of loyalty, you can begin to choose what deserves your loyalty. The ultimate insight is that letting go is not about becoming someone who doesn't care. It's about becoming someone who cares so deeply, so consciously, so skillfully, that you know exactly what to hold and what to release, what to preserve and what to transform, what to carry and what to put down. It's about becoming so intimate with your own psyche that you can negotiate with it, so aware of your own patterns that you can choose to continue them or change them, so conscious of your own contracts that you can honor them or rewrite them. This is true freedom, not the absence of feeling, but the presence of choice. Not the elimination of attachment, but the consciousness of attachment. Not the escape from suffering, but the transformation of suffering into wisdom. Not the letting go of what matters, but the conscious choosing of what matters most.